What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online, as always. Today I'm going to look at a piece of land in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. It's the Lofty's newest addition to their site. And wow, look at that projected annual return, 42.97%. Weird though, you're only getting 7% in rental yield. So what does that mean when you see that? Let's take a look. When you look into their financials and figure out how they um, figure that out, they are projecting a 35.97% appreciation rate. That is, I mean, I don't know. Uh, I really try to give Lofty the benefit of the doubt on a lot of stuff. I think that the platform itself, I think there's a real future in having a platform like this. Sometimes they just want to do things like that are going to make more sales on the platform. And they, I mean, I just can't believe that they're projecting that sort of, annual appreciation rate, um, regardless of what has happened in the past. And so I'll show you this. Um, I think they do talk about it in the listing somewhere. Yeah, it says, since 2020, uh, if you look at their comparable land sales since 2020, they started at $1.78 per square foot, and then this appraised value is at 5.99 per square foot. So they're saying, well, that's a 35.9% average annual appreciation over the last 5 years. So that's what we're going to project every year going forward. And that is just, I mean, you can tell, I think that's absurd, right? I think that does it mean this is a bad deal? I don't think so, right? Like, I don't think that just because they're making some ridiculous claim about what the appreciation is going to look like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad deal. It means they're perfectly um, happy to just really give you some, rainbows and unicorns type projections. But it doesn't mean it's wrong, right? I mean, you could have another 5 years of the most unbelievable appreciation that you've had in the last 5 years. I think it's highly unlikely. I don't know, I don't know if you're new to real estate, you might not realize that from 2020 to 2022, we had just completely unprecedented appreciation in a lot of markets. Um, and then depending on where you are, so some places it's continued um, more than others. Some there's been a little bit of a pullback, but the bottom line is, I mean, y- no matter, I would never take any 5 years of average appreciation and say, oh, well, that's what it's going to do for the next year, and into the future, right? I mean, because when they show this, they're always just talking about the next year. But it implies like if I'm buying an investment for a specific return, I'm expecting it for the whole time, right? And if you look at what they're doing, they're talking about holding it for 3 to 5 years to realize that appreciation, and then they'll vote on whether or not to sell at that time. In the meantime, there's some income. It's this 7% rental yield. What it seems to be, there was some discussion about this in the Discord. It really wasn't very clear. The answer, they just kept saying, well, the LLC is paying rent. But I think what they're saying is their entity that sold the land to, in onto Lofty, is going to pay rent basically, um, just to make it attractive, right? Like they're just, I don't believe there's any income actually coming into the land itself. I think the entity that's selling the equity on Lofty is agreeing to pay some rent so that there's some yield in the meantime. Um, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't mind if they want to pay us something to hold on to it. But if that's the case, and that's what appears to be the case from looking at the lease agreement, um, it's this is the LLC, 1048 Hilton Road LLCs. We're calling it the tenant, but I believe also when we look at let's see, the owner, 1040 Hilton Road LLC, transfer their properties deed to the new LLC. So they're saying, this entity that did the transfer and is getting paid for, for those tokens that they're selling out is the one that's going to pay rent. So let's get back to that lease. And so they're just paying an amount, to give you a 7% yield. And it appears that they're just doing it to, to give you some money to entice you to hold this, instead of just making it just purely a speculative land play. You're going to get paid a little bit and do that. Um, one thing I think that's good about that is it shows that these people um, have some real belief in this property appreciation and that they're going to make some money in the future, potentially, or they're thinking, hey, if we can sell these at $50 a share, we've already made a ton of money based on that. And if we have to pay 7% for the next 3 to 5 years, that's only, 35% of whatever we got in the meantime. Um, you could look at that either way, right? But the thing that I don't really like is, this is a commercial lease. You're leasing something to a LLC. Typically, when I've worked with commercial leases, you get some information about the tenant. You might get, uh, they don't typically do credit reports the way we think of in residential, but there you might get a Dun and Bradstreet report. You'll definitely get financial statements. You'll get just some data about the tenant itself to be able to understand like whether or not it has an ability to pay that lease. Like we don't really know. Okay, so that entity is going to sell some of the tokens, and that's how they're raising capital. Presumably, they're holding that to be able to pay out that 7%. But I don't know. To me, that's a little worrisome. I'd like to know, does it own anything else? Probably not, because its address is the address of this property. But we don't know that for sure. And then there's an addendum that basically says, the seller's putting 60% of their ownership in the property up as collateral. So they're not. It confused me a little bit, but it makes me think they're not selling all of their, um, they're only selling so much equity onto the platform, and they're saying, well, if they don't make the 7% payment, the lofty entity, the DAO or the DAO, I would say DAO. I don't even know if that's what people call that, but it looks like the DAO of Jeet Kune Do, that kind of DAO. Anyway, uh, but I've never heard anyone else say it in real life, so I'm not sure. But that entity has the ability to, okay, go ahead and take over the rest of the land, the ownership in the land. To me, I mean, that, it makes this look a lot like a mortgage, but with like some benefit from the appreciation of it. I don't know. It's sort of an interesting structure. This is super thin, right? Like, I don't know. I guess they would just execute it through their token buyback mechanism, by taking the tokens. I'm really not sure. Whenever they do these things and there's just like, this is clearly not like a legal document, right? Like that's been drafted by an attorney and I mean, I hope not. It doesn't look like anything that I would have wrote in the short time that I was one. But in any case, it should give you a little bit more, feel a little bit better about getting paid that. But at the same time, if this was ever challenged, Lofty might have the ability to do it token wise, but if it was ever challenged in court, they might be able to unwind that transaction. I think whenever I talk about and I don't know that, I retired my law license years ago. I don't give legal advice, so please don't take this as that. And I'm just speculating on, how much does this really make me feel better? And just a little bit, that they're willing to make that claim, I think, more than anything else. Okay, so you're going to get 7%, a 7% yield, and you're buying this piece of land. It's in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. So I didn't mention, this is, let's see, this is the piece of land, and there's this house here that you might be wondering, well, what is this address? I used to live here. I lived here for a couple of years back in, I don't know, like 2016, 17, and 18, I think, sometime around there. Um, zero point 0.3 miles from this property. So I know this area very well. I've been by this property probably hundreds of times, um, maybe more. I mean, so it's super interesting to me to see one of these pop up. What's really funny is I lived in Palmyra, this is actually Cinnaminson. Like this is right, the city line divides them. At first, when I saw this, I thought that they were actually mistakenly saying it was Cinnaminson, but it really is. I checked the property line, and it looks like that is the case. I think that's a good thing. Cinnaminson tends to sell for a little bit more than Palmyra, but it is not necessarily the. I don't know. I don't think it's not the most desirable city in South Jersey. Uh, so I lived there for a little while, and then I lived in South Jersey in general for like another, I don't know, maybe 6 years, more than that. So all this area I know pretty well. I worked in real estate at the time. And so I want to jump into the appraisal and a couple of the comps and just so let me show you first though. I'm kind of jumping all over the place. This says I looked it up on Zillow. They don't give us estimate. They're telling you what the assessed value is, only 70K. You can also see the last time that this sold was for $60,000 back in 2021. I'm assuming that is uh, ownership prior to the title transfer. Oh well, okay. Wait a minute. Grantor, grantee. Oh no, this is the transfer to the Lofty entity. I thought they actually usually give you something that lets you see that they had title, that the title was in their name. Um, if not, view the LLC docs here. No, and proof of title transfer. Let's look at that again. It's saying it's both. So that's the deed. That's the transfer to Lofty. That's the legal description for that. Um, so I'm not sure how they're saying that this is evidence that they owned it ahead of time. Um, Super interesting. I mean, they're swearing to that they own it and that they're granting it, but that's not the same as like showing their deed, which is what I'd like to see. Um, Usually I look it up in the county records. I didn't do that on this one. You could probably do that and see that they own it. But so I believe that's what when they bought it, right, for 60,000. So you can see, if they can sell it for, oh, I didn't even show you that yet. But if you look at the order book, if you look at the market cap at $50, they're selling it for 260,000. So selling out for that, selling equity to sort of lock in that appreciation that they believe they've experienced. I can imagine it being worth it to pay 7% yield from now until sometime in the future when you actually sell it. Um, so I understand the motivation from their perspective. So one, that's $200,000 of appreciation that is baked in, and so the appraisal I think is doing a lot of work here, right? Like if I'm going to believe that that's the value, well, it says 245 here, but what did they do? Let's see on the financials tab. So 257.25. I think they said, okay, I'm going to get a full 5% extra, right? So 5 times 245. Yeah, then that's the full 5% extra. That's what Lofty allows. So they're already, saying, well, it's really worth, we're selling it for 5% more, um, than what this appraisal says, and then you have some other fees on top of that. Um, I never like it when they do that. I like to buy properties at a discount. When you have an appraisal in hand and you're saying, oh, I'm going to pay more than that, it never seems like good business to me. Now, here you can say, well, yeah, you're paying more than that, but you're getting some income from the land that you really shouldn't be. Maybe there's a little bit of a trade-off there. Um, I can see that. I think that's kind of fair. But I am, so one of the things, okay, we always look at the FEMA flood map. You can see this is just well into the floodplain here, right? And so to me, like South Jersey is very, very developed. It's not like San Antonio where you have a lot of places where people are still building new homes. There's just not a whole lot of new home construction. This might be a nice little lot down by the river, with a dock that I might be able to put a boat into the river or something. Maybe I want to go camping there. I just can't imagine. Um, if you've watched any of my other videos, I'm really don't like flood zones to begin with. I can't imagine just wanting to build something new in this flood zone. Now you can see, there's plenty of homes that are built there. None of these, well, maybe there's a couple of new construction homes, but like my home that was over here was built, I think, in 1940 or 1945, and that seems like around the time when this area was built out. I'm sure you have some newer stuff. I mean, this stuff is obviously not built the same exact time period as the ones that I had, but um, I don't know. So I think that this is not what I would expect to be like a highly desirable development lot. And the Pennsauken Creek is. Well, I wonder if we can get. I mean, they have some pictures here that make it look, reasonable, but it's not. This isn't exactly like. I guess maybe they are using it for camping here or something. But there's like a nature trail that we used to go walk on. Yeah, you can see somebody's putting a kayak in there. Like this is what I think, you know, the value of this property is more than I just would be really surprised if somebody builds this and or buys this and builds on it. I guess they could and they would have to, maybe build something a little taller or on stilts or I mean I don't know. I mean people do all kinds of strange things, but for me it would be a very tough sell. I'm always trying to avoid flood zones, especially when I'm buying land. If you're buying an existing structure and you can do the things to mitigate the risk to that structure, that's one thing. But to buy land to build on, knowing you're in a flood zone is always to me like it's very strange that somebody would want to do that unless it's like such a desirable area that you could just build something like where people build up on stilts or just build like these real fortresses that are just not going to get flood damage. And it's a pricey enough area to do that. I don't think that Cinnaminson, New Jersey is. I mean, like this is so to give you a little, when I lived here, this was just a home that I bought, lived in a couple of years, moved out, and rented it. Um, and then I ended up selling it a year or two ago and doing amazing on it because this is an area that's been improving, but it's definitely an area where we bought the home knowing it would be a good rental, right? Like I mean that's a strategy that I used to do a lot. I've done several times anyway. Buy a home, live in it a short time, move out, rent it. That's a pretty traditional real estate investor strategy for when people are getting started, and I did it probably more times than I should, but didn't mind moving a whole bunch. But this is not an area. So this is an area that I moved out of once we got closer to where my kid was getting ready to go to school. It's nice enough little town. I mean, they had like a couple little restaurants and very close to getting the bridge to go to Philly. Um, but I think the school that we were assigned to would have been rated like a 2 or a 3 on great schools. Like I mean, it was shockingly low. I think it's gone up a little bit since then. I wonder if well, anyway, I think that even if it's gone up a little bit, I don't picture this area being the place where somebody buys a lot for $300,000 to build a home on. And that's the other thing I want to talk about is the survey. So maybe you think, well, it's a big enough piece we could build. We could cut it into a couple of lots and build on. Size wise, I think that's true, but I think there's a couple of reasons maybe you couldn't. One, the strange shape. It's always tough. I've owned, I guess, really only a couple irregular shaped lots, but I had one that was shaped very much like this, and it just cuts down on the ability to place more than one property on the site, depending on the size of it. Now, I think I didn't dig into their zoning code for here, so I don't know that they could, whether they could or couldn't. You can see that they have a 35 foot side and rear setbacks. When you put that on these triangular lots, I mean, it really just eats into you end up having like this long pointy area in the back, and it really just eats into your buildable square footage. Um, and they have a different one in the appraisal. I know I'm jumping all around. I'm sorry. I have a lot of thoughts about this one. Um, I'm not saying that don't invest in it just because I'm sharing all this negative stuff. I mean, you have to really think about for yourself, like, do I want to be a speculator on the on where land prices are going? It is a market where there's not a ton of places to build, and so in the future, if you could put more than one home on the lot, I think that changes the value quite a bit. You can see, so this is the older appraisal. It's not the or older survey. This is what was thrown into the appraisal. It's not the one. Let's see. Yeah, this is from 2021. It's not the one that was provided here, which was. This is the newer. Oh no, this is actually an older one. I didn't realize that. That's funny that they. This is the one they uploaded as the appraisal, or as the survey in the file, but the appraiser must have just had access to this newer one. Um, and so they have these riparian grants, and I had to look up what these are to remind myself because I knew I had dealt with them, but it has to do with when the in the past, and you can see, there's former high water line repair, and so in the past there's been average high water higher than what it is now. And because it's been lower, the state basically says, no, we'll grant you the right to, you can take this piece of land back, even though, the way the rules are at the time, it belonged to the state because it was their the riparian rights have to do with the rights of, well, I always forget. It's water rights, but I always forget which one is tidal and which one's actually just rivers. But it's I looked it up. I don't have it up still. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on what that is, but you can see, so that's basically what granted the ownership in these, in parts of it. Um, which I mean that it just makes me uncomfortable, right? Like I'm very much someone who's avoided flood zones as long as I could, and I mean you can see like rivers just change course. I don't know that I've mentioned it on my channel anytime recently. I was in the Navy for 4 years. I was attached to a riverine unit, and so I spent a lot of time on rivers. And one of the things, in small boats on rivers, mostly in South America, but in our country as well, just doing training. And one of the things that you learn is that rivers just they meander, right? They don't stay on the same path forever. We would sometimes have older maps, and the river that we were on, from like if we had a 20 or 30-year-old map, sometimes the river would be considerably different. Now, so it really scares me to be, on one where you can see like it is a meandering river, and and there's, you've had a different high water mark before. Um, they're all things to think about now. Obviously, if you believe you're going to get 42% return per year, and you're not worried about this happening in the next 3 to 5 years, because to be frank, I think it's a very low risk of that happening. But I mean, typically the rivers will change their courses whenever you have basically excess rain or something, or flooding that comes from something, maybe a big storm, and then it can affect the shape of it, right? But I think that's way too much in the weeds on that kind of stuff. But so I think that's a risk I'm not comfortable with, as far as is there going to be an end user developer that really wants to buy this? Um, or is this it's some one funny thing about land, and I've seen this, and I've actually made money on this myself, is that there are some land, pure land speculators out there. There are people that are just going to buy a piece of land. They don't care what you can do with it today. They just know there's only so much land, and someday in the future it might be worth more. I've bought and sold lots where you know I've always thought about, what could this be used for? And that's been my, the sort of due diligence I do on a lot for, like, what's the worst case situation? But sometimes I've bought them from people who really didn't think they could do anything with it. Like I bought this one tiny lot that it turned out um, because of I had to get like a savvy architect to be able to come up with something that you could build on it because of how small it was and what all the setbacks were like and everything. But it turned out you could build something, and so then when I put the plans together, then a builder, a small spec builder came in and bought it. But it is, and then I've been on the other side where like I had something I had come up with a plan for, but then somebody bought it, that was really just going to sit on it for a long time. Um, so those people exist out there, and I don't honestly know. I mean, so they haven't put forth in this listing any sort of like idea of what this could be used for in the future that I noticed. And so they're just saying, hey, we bought this. It's gone up a bunch in value, and we think it's just going to keep going up a bunch. And, we'll hold it for a few more years and then we'll sell. But in the meantime, we're going to cash out, some portion for us. How much are they selling? So, oh, that right. So at one point they said they'd sell up to 50%. So if you sell 50%, they've doubled their money back, right? So they bought it for 60. If you sell it for, and that's what I'm speculating on that, right? I'm not 100% sure that they're that last purchase on Zillow, but that's something that you could verify. You can, if you were interested in this and you wanted to know a little bit more, you could look it up in the county records. I'm sure you'd be able to find that. Um, but so okay, if they sell half of these tokens at $50, they're getting 125,000, 130,000. Yeah, that's double what they paid for, right? And so they've had some holding costs and whatnot, had to pay the real estate taxes and everything, although it's assessed at 70,000, so not a ton of real estate taxes. So from their perspective, I mean, I think this completely de-risks that deal for them, right? Like it's already a double, and then they can hold it, and okay, they agree to pay some yield in the meantime, and then maybe they sell it. Maybe you get some additional appreciation. One thing that I am sort of skeptical of is I think that if you were in their shoes, why not just sell it today if you really think it's worth the 245? I mean, I guess the answer is you have to find something to put that in that you think is going to do as well. And, if you really truly believe this is going to keep going up 35% per year, I just, it's really hard for me to get behind that. One more thing I wanted to show you about that is okay. So this is, just Cinnaminson Township, um, the price appreciation for homes, single family homes on Zillow, right? And so in the last year, homes have gone up 7.4%. So it seems pretty strange to me that land has gone up 35% in a year that home prices have only gone up 7%. Um, if you look at, the trend overall, I mean, you did have some sort of steep increase here. Um, but it isn't like, this is okay. Now we're in 2020. Where we at 286. So yeah, I mean, we almost have, it's not a double, but it's not far off from a double, right? I don't know. I mean, you have a considerable rise in home prices, but to say that that's, I don't know. I'm very suspect of that land. Oh, and then so let me show you one more thing about the appraisal or two more things that I think you should really consider if you decide that you are a land speculator and this is the type of deal that you want to look at, right? Not the right deal for me, but I'm not saying it's something that I could imagine somebody being interested in this sort of thing. If you could convince yourself that 35%, annual appreciation is real, or really, I think if you believed that you were going to get half that, it could certainly turn into a good deal if you get. My worry is that the 245 isn't a real price, and really you're paying 257. And so let's say if it sold today, you really could only get 180. Well, then you might have to wait 2 years to actually get the 245. I mean, that would be my concern, right? Because you're just putting a lot of faith um, in the appraisal, and that's it, right? Like, I mean, you don't have um, some other, it didn't just recently sell. It's not, okay. And I want to show you this map. This is a map of the comps. Um, the comps. This is the comparable sales that they used. It is tough. I know appraising something like this where there's just not a whole lot of lots that have sold. They looked at, the period of time they looked at was, it looked like they broke it up into two distinct periods of time. It was 2022 to 2024, and then 2020 to 2022. Um, but it's, then this is all the sales they came up with. Not very many. But look at this. This sale is 20 miles away. Uh, so, if you don't know New Jersey at all, these are all little tiny cities. Like, you're going through to go from here, you go from Cinnaminson to Palmyra to Riverton to, oh, I don't even know what's right next. But like you're going through Burlington, like you're going through a bunch of towns, right? When I'm trying to do comps in San Antonio, I'm usually trying to get something in the same neighborhood. Now, obviously, you can't do that here because there's so few land sales. But to believe that I can use a comp that's 20 miles away, to me, it's just really tough. And I mean, especially, I'm going to actually look at a couple of the comps and show you a few things in the appraisal itself, just to think about, right? I'm not saying that he's wrong because he's the appraiser and I'm not. But just a couple things to think about. So, okay, our subject property is zoned flood zone AE 100-year flooding. Um, these additional comparables all were that, so that's great. Um, and these three were all in Pennsauken. So, I mean, not all in Pennsauken. We're in Cinnaminson. Why do they all say Cinnaminson? Um, Inmon, this one was. So, I don't know. To me, those don't look like terrible comps, but he's not waiting. Some of these were further back. He's not putting a lot of weight in a couple of them. You can read this, but, these are actually, though, priced way higher. And I think this is why, right? Because they're much smaller lots, right? Like this is a tiny lot. This is a little tiny lot. So the price per foot of lot is going to be a lot higher typically. This one is about half the size. This one, I mean, again, it's like less than half. So those, it's hard to compare those on a price per square foot when you have something that's so much different size. Because, for example, if you could only build one home on each, you're not going to pay twice as much for one that's bigger. Now it's also on the river. I don't know that any of them were actually on a river. I guess, but but they did at least find some others in a flood zone. But so those three were all in flood zones. But this one, number 4 wasn't in a flood zone. Number 6 wasn't in a flood zone. And then we have to go back up into here. Or was in, it is a flood zone, but it was zone X, right? It's not, that's where a lot of people would just prefer to be compared to AE, right? And so, like, okay, you're zone X here, zone X here, zone X here. Like, to me, I don't expect to get anywhere close to the same price for one, unless he's trying to say, well, yeah, but you're by the river, so that counteracts it. I mean, maybe you can do that. And then, so, okay, not too much different size. Again, not too different size, way smaller, right? So these are not, I guess my overall point is comps for land sales in a place like this where there's just not very much raw land being sold. It's really tough, right? I mean, um, whether or not any of those lots are triangular lots, I think plays a big role in when somebody's actually looking at it to build on it, what they're going to do, what the topography is, right? And I think he does, or he even tells you, about the zoning. Oh yeah, that's the other thing too, is our zoning is industrial, but they're saying highest and best use is residential development. I didn't see anything about a phase 1 environmental being done. when I'm buying commercial or industrial land, it's something I always want to do, especially in New Jersey. I mean, I think New Jersey is actually, if I remember correctly, it's the Superfund capital of the world. I think I took a couple environmental law courses in law school, and I want to say, um, I'm not even going to guess, but there's like so many Superfund sites and whatnot. So that's something that I'm always going to be concerned with. Is this one? Probably not, right? It doesn't look like it's near factory or anything, but it does seem like you've got a, lawn care services. What is that? I really remember that. Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't really know what they do there, but any time that you have an industrial or commercial zoning, I'm always much more curious about what it was used for in the past. It looks like probably nothing. Um, But you never know. I mean, like they could have had equipment storage and stuff that leaks, or you just have a higher chance of something like that than on a residential property. So it's one of the things that I'm concerned with. But you have to compare the zoning. You have to compare. They're saying that overall that the functional utility is overall average. Um, I just don't know. I don't know that I agree with that because of the shape of the lot, because it's in a flood zone. But I mean, they're already comparing flood zones, so I guess they're not comparing functional utility there. I thought that they also have um, whether or not there was a slope, but I'm not seeing it now. I need to start doing these a little bit earlier, not at 2 in the morning. So sorry if I am just missing it. Um, but you can look in here and you can see he has a description of, and it is hard to read on the regular size, but he tells you like which comps he's giving higher weight to and whatnot, and why, or a little bit about why. So it's not. I don't know that I'm saying I think it's completely wrong. I mean, I just think it's a tough job, and you're basically making your whole investment on this in the hopes that that appraiser was right on that day, right, with the limited information that he had. And so, okay, so that gets you from the or from the 60,000 to the 250 or 245. So that's how we, figured out our appreciation rate. And that, so it's based on it's calculated based on that, right? From the last sale to what it appraised for. And then on top of that, we want to say, and that rate is going to continue into the future, right? So I think that you have to have a lot of faith to believe that you're going to be anywhere close to that. I'm not saying that you won't. I think it's possible, but it's not the type of bet that I'm on Lofty to make. I'd much rather find a piece of property where there are a lot of reliable comps, right? I can look at a lot of similar properties sold, and I can tell that I'm buying it for less than it's worth today, right? Like, I mean, we can see that over and over again. I found a lot of those deals. Um, I will tell you, I do a lot of these, and I think probably in the first 5 minutes you could tell that I wasn't going to buy this one. But I really just want to help everybody think about how we're looking at deals. Just share some of my real estate knowledge and experience, and what I'm thinking about when I decide whether or not I'm going to buy this. And just because I will or won't doesn't mean you should or shouldn't. I have one of my team members. She's, made a bunch of money last year on my team. And so she's looking at, investing in some deals, and Lofty is one of the places she's thinking about putting some money. And, you know, just like a lot of other people, her first thing was to log on, look at what they're saying these projected rental yields are and the projected annual returns. And, just believing that, this platform is doing, doing some real work to back up these numbers, right? Not like just taking someone's word for it. And unfortunately, a lot of these listings, it seems like they really are just like that. Whoever's bringing the property to the platform, I mean, this is a very weird way to justify what, a super high appreciation rate. Again, it doesn't mean that I think they're wrong. It's just not something I would bet on, right? I'm not going to put my money at risk betting that they're right, and it's not as if I'm shorting it. That'd be if I was certain enough to bet they're wrong. I'm just see better places for my capital. Um, I do always forget to tell you until the end. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I have links to all the places that I'm currently investing in real estate online in the description below. Uh, Another thing I wanted to ask though is if you're somebody who has invested on Lofty, and you have any interest in having a discussion on my channel and about your experience, about deals, about any of it, let me know because I'd be happy to do that. I think that one of the things is I've noticed there are some, pretty unhappy former Lofty unit users that complain on my site, and if you are one of them, or not on my channel, like in the comments sometimes, if you're one of them, I'd really like to, find out how you experience the platform, what it looked like, because I definitely know they have problems. I also know I'm making money on here. I've already done pretty well on a few deals, and my overall, and I haven't been on here long, right? So there's plenty of room to make a lot more mistakes and lose money. But overall, it's treating me really well. But I am looking at things. I almost just completely ignore these numbers, right? Like, I mean, these are completely worthless to me. Their financials tab is almost always mostly worthless. There's a couple of things that I'm looking out on here, right? I'm looking at actual documents. I'm looking at, third party sites to confirm certain stuff. Um, and I think that that's the way that you have to use it if you want to make money using it. You can't just open it up, go to the marketplace. This is what actually got one of my the agent I was talking about. She's like, "Well, it's a featured deal. Why would they feature it if it's not one of their best performers, right?" And yes, that is what a logical person would think. But actually, they feature deals, I think, because they like the way they look. They're like, oh, or some other reason, right? But it's certainly not, maybe because it had the highest yield that month. But it's certainly not because somebody looked at these deals and said, that's actually a good deal, right? Some of these, like you can see, I guess it's not based on the yield last month because some of these have had no yield. Although, this is one that I actually, um, if you're looking for a long-term hold, I don't hate that one. I like what he's doing. And I like some of his properties. I own one of them, not that one. I very am hesitant to say like, I would that any of them are a deal because I really want you to look at really understand how to think about the real estate and not just somebody I was talking to on Discord the other day was like, oh, which ones do you like? And I mentioned them. He's like, oh, I just bought one of those, and that just freaked me out because that it's not. I think it's the way that you get hurt on here is by picking properties without really digging into the properties. Um, that's really all I want to share about it today. Again, if you are somebody who has a strong opinion one way or another, or wants to talk about Lofty, and you'd want to, it would just be a Zoom call or something like that. And you can, we can figure it out ahead of time exactly what we're doing. You can see, I did an interview with one of the creators of Saul's Lot not too long ago, and it would be something like that, right? Just a discussion. Maybe we pull up some of the properties that you bought and talk about how much you paid for them if you want to do that. um, find out what your experience was. Because one of the things that's really difficult to find out on Lofty is how properties performed historically, right? Like you can look at some of the notes in there and the updates, but they don't really give you useful historical financials. They give you like that transaction document that is just like, you could create P&Ls out of it, but it's just like I'm not taking the time to do that unless it's a deal that I think is a really good deal, and I'm actually going to dig into those. But for the most part, they're just not really giving you all the info that you'd want, which is two things, right? It's frustrating, but it is why there are opportunities on this site. I mean, there are just some fantastic deals because they make it so hard to know if something's a good deal, and so people have bought stuff, they've lost money, they've sold it at a discount. At that discount, it might be a great deal. Or, some of them I think I don't think every single one of them had to be a discount to be a good deal. I own this one. I paid a little bit of this one. I paid very close to $50. I think I paid $48. And I'm perfectly happy with it. I don't have any complaints. It's paid out now. I've only owned it for 3 or 4 months. But I don't see any reason that it's not going to continue until some dilution happens with the loan, which will eventually happen. But so, it's not as if every single one is a dud, but finding the gems in here is where that's the secret, right? That's like where the magic is going to happen. If you can, um, if you can just sift through all the junk and find I think actually that's why I enjoy it. I used to like go to thrift stores, buy stuff to sell on eBay. I've always like spent tons of time looking for undervalued properties, but here you can do it and you can find them every single day. You can find a token that is cheaper than it should be, and it might only be a couple tokens, but like, I'm buying stuff almost every day. Sometimes selling some quickly afterwards because it's just the discount. There's nothing else about the deal that I really like. Um, but yeah, now that's like way too long of a ramble. If you're still watching this 46 minutes and 22 seconds in, first, thank you, but also you might want to rethink how you spend your time because, like, I don't know. I think it could be useful. Hopefully, you watch it at 2x speed because I realize that I am a relatively slow talker when I do these. But now that's really it. No, nothing else. Until next time, I'm going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.